Okay, so we'll say hello to Jose sometime in the near future when he listens to this. So, or watches it. But the stuff that I provided you here hopefully will help because it's just a lot. If I was just teaching this and just going from person to person to name to group and stuff, it's just a sea of information. So hopefully having this in front of you will help make some sense of it. And then, like I said, the last pages that I provided you, um, it's a different set of notes. It breaks it down a little bit further, hopefully to make sense of how this works. So, um, what we're gonna find is that this section is as detailed a prophecy that you're gonna find in all the Bible. And how it plays out into history, the details that match up with these proclamations is off the charts. So if you were to take obviously the messianic promises that are found throughout the whole Bible, that's in a category all its own, right? This, if we were just to categorize all the other prophecies and the things that we would see, we talk, I mean, even in this book, if we go back to Daniel chapter 2 and the statue, that's pretty remarkable, right? Because it's talking about entire kingdoms. This gets into one right after the other of this king does that and this king, it's nuts how much is predicted here and how it's fulfilled. So it's going to be a little bit to chew on. So at first glance, you're going to feel a little bit lost, is because this is the chapter that I spent 2 days on way back when I taught this for my at Kent, and I spent 2 days mapping all this stuff out. And then I had touched base with one of my elders who has had this beautiful chart in his Bible because after he got done and I got done teaching it, I don't think I told you that. He was like, "Look, I got it right here." And I had it all on a whiteboard, and it took me like 2 full days of work to get this all mapped out. And so I meant to ask him about it sooner. When I did ask him, he was going to track it down for me. And I wasn't able to grab it in time this week. This week's been, as usual, one of those crazy busy weeks. So, but what we find here with this is just, it's unreal. So, and we'll start to unpack some of this as we go through here. Now, so just kind of breaking down or summarizing the content of this chapter in the way that, so we would ask the question, why does this chapter contain such specific predictions of historical events of seemingly minor importance? Kind of all this stuff that's happening is going to be happening in and around Jerusalem after the post-exilic return. So this is going to be what's happening in that intertestamental period of 400 BC up to the time of Christ, mainly centering on that one fellow, Antiochus Epiphanes. That's where all this is going. But to get there, we go through a lot of stuff from Alexander. This takes us from Alexander to Antiochus with great detail. So what's happening here? Why go to all this trouble? Well, the marvels of prophecy may be expressed in a number of ways. This mode of exact prediction is not necessarily more marvelous than other features found in prophetic oracles. Such predictions could well, in evil days, serve the purpose of reminding people that all things great and small are under the providence of God. Such prediction offers no problem to the believers, and no other prophet was around to guide the faithful through this period. Remember, this is a period of silence. After Malachi does his thing, that's it. So, in the time frame, when we see there at the right as they return and get things reestablished, then there's a quite a bit of silence that occurs there. So there's no other prophet on the scene. So this book of Daniel is going to be playing out before their eyes in these time frames, and then and especially leading up to what's going to happen with Antiochus. And so it's Epiphanes, by the way, because there's more than one Antiochus, which makes this fun. There's there's a lot of names that are the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and so that's where this can get a little bit nutty. So now, why does the chapter contain specific prediction only until about 165? So it takes us to about that time frame. The date marked a very difficult crisis in Israel. When it passed, ordinary prophetic words were entirely adequate in the wisdom of God. So this is taking us up to this climactic event of this time period, and this is the desecration of the temple, which happened with Antiochus and all this kind of stuff. So if you ever get a chance, because this is not one that you would probably jump on, like if you saw that Dr. Peer was teaching the Gospel of John, you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm all over that, right? That's a great subject, incredible book, that kind of thing. But then you see a class called Post-Exilic Israel, you're probably like, oh my gosh, that can't be that interesting. There's a wild time in there. And what you find out is you get to learn a bunch of stuff about setting the stage for when Christ came. So you get to understand all the history and how that led up to the state of affairs in Jerusalem when Jesus shows up. And that helps to give you a little understanding. It's really quite fascinating. It's worth your time to study it. And it's something that post-exilic Israel and also into the intertestamental periods, very fascinating time frame. All right, so Daniel chapter 11, let's see what it says. Okay. And then chapter 12 is not too hard at all compared to this. This may carry us into next week a little bit. We'll see how much we can get through it. Okay, so there's a lot here. Then this king, then that king, then this king, then that king, and we're gonna try to make sense of it all, okay? There's a lot of that. So it says, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement and a protection for him. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, three more kings are going to arise in Persia. Well, let me back up. Verse 21. However, I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth, yet there's no one who stands firmly with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. So there's still a connection here to some of the things that we're seeing here playing out in who's talking and all that stuff. And now I will tell you the truth. Verse 2. Behold, three more kings are going to arise in Persia, then a fourth, who will gain far more riches than all of them. As soon as he becomes strong, through his riches, he will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece. And a mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. Now, so hopefully the stuff we've studied so far, you've already got a little bit of an idea of who that is. Who do you think that is? Verse 3.
Alexander?
Yeah, good. Right? And then verse 4 gives us even clearer that it's Alexander. But as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 points of the compass, right? Northeast, southwest. And so this is that, these are those four generals who, the Didache, we'll talk about that. Will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendants.
I didn't understand.
So Alexander didn't have an heir that could take over. We're gonna find out about that too. Nor according to his authority which he wielded, for his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others besides them. Then the king of the south. Okay, so this is what it's gonna boil down to. This is, of these four groups, there's one in the south, there's one quote in the north, and these guys are gonna have, or be fussing at each other through this whole book. What we're gonna find out that there's gonna be a conflict between two of these families or these lines or genealogies, these kingdoms, however you wanna call it. They're gonna be at each other's throats, and who's gonna be stuck smack dab in the middle of all of it?
Daniel.
Sorta. Think bigger. Remember, this is the intertestamental period of time, so by this time stuff's happening, he's long gone.
Israel.
It's gonna be Israel. So when we talk about north and south, it's in relationship to Jerusalem. So that's where we're, because depending on where you are depends on who's the king to the north and who's the king to the south, right? And so the reference point here is Jerusalem. It is, so that's Israel that's gonna be the reference point. Okay? So then the king of the south will grow strong along with one of his princes who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion. His domain will be a great dominion indeed. And after some years, they will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement. Oh, this is going to work, right? Here's my daughter. You can marry her, right? But she will not retain her position of power, nor will he remain with his power, but she will be given up, along with those who brought her in, and the one who sired her, as well as he who supported her in those times. Some interesting details here. But one of the descendants of her line will arise in his place, and he will come against their army and enter the fortress of the king of the north. And he will deal with them and display great strength. And also their gods with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold, he will take into captivity to Egypt. And he, on his part, will refrain from attacking the king of the north for some years. So now we have an identity of one of these groups. Egypt is the south. Okay? Now then the latter will enter the realm of the king of the south, but will return to his own land, and his sons will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one of them will keep on coming and overthrow and pass through, that he may wage war upon up to his very fortress. And the king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north. Then the latter will raise a great multitude, but that multitude will be given into the hand of the former. Sheesh. This is kind of intimidating stuff, isn't it? When the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cause tens of thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail. For the king of the north will again raise a greater multitude than the former, and after an interval of some years, he will press on with a great army and much equipment. Now, in those times, many will rise up against the king of the south, the violent ones among your people will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they will fall down. Again, then the king of the north will come, cast up a siege mound, and capture a well-fortified city, and the forces of the south will not stand their ground, not even their choicest troops, for there will be no strength to make a stand. But he who comes against him will do as he pleases, and no one will be able to withstand. He will also stay for a while in the beautiful land. Where's that? Yep.
Promised land.
With destruction in his hand. All right, let's stop there. All right, so we could just keep going and going and going. It's a lot of king of the north, king of the south, king of the north, and that one, and this one, and that one, and that one. And how in the world are we supposed to make any sense of this? So that's what we're going to try to do. So, like I said, it's a lot, but we're going to try to make sense of it. And we're going to be thankful for some individuals that have invested a lot of study in this and then helped us to understand, because the history that plays out in this time frame, it's like you have this laid out, and then all the history that happens, it's like it just matches up perfectly, laid right over top of it. It's remarkable. So when you start to look at it, it's just off. It's ridiculously accurate. So that's what we're going to try to establish here. So back in the 10th chapter, we saw the beginning of the final vision recorded by Daniel. So a vision that pertains to what will affect Daniel's people, describing what will occur in latter days, for the vision refers to many days yet to come. Now, remember we started to break that all down. Its words were to be closed and sealed to the time of the end. For such reasons, this vision has been called the vision of the time of the end. Now, our question is, based on that statement, what's the question we need to ask?
What's the end?
The end of what? Right? We're going to ask the end of what? Now, in the introductory remarks of the vision, we were given a glimpse of spiritual warfare that was going on behind the scenes, which was pretty cool, right? With Michael and angels and the prince of Persia and the prince of Greece and all that kind of stuff. So with angelic forces withstanding each other, with angelic forces helping each other. Now beginning with Daniel 11:2, the vision of the time of the end begins in earnest. The glorious man proceeds to tell Daniel what will happen in the latter days, beginning with this Persian and Greek conflict. So it says 4 Persian kings will arise. Well, it says there in verse 2, 3 more kings will arise in Persia. So if you have a Persian king and 3 more, that's 4. Right? Then the fourth shall be far richer than them all, but by his strength and riches, the fourth shall stir up against all Greece. So there's 4 here. So this lays out, this is kind of cool. This is Cyrus, Cambyses, Smerdis, Darius Hystapsis, all right, and Xerxes. So starting with Cambyses is the first, Smerdis, Darius Hystapsis, and then Xerxes. All right, Xerxes is important. That should ring a bell from another book of the Bible. Xerxes has a counterpart name that we see in Scripture called Ahasuerus. Does that name ring a bell? Xerxes Ahasuerus. That takes us to Ezra 4:6, but also that's the primary individuals that are involved in the book of Esther. When she goes to the king, it's Xerxes, Artaxerxes, Ahasuerus. Those are the names that are at play there. What we see happening there. So that's who's dealing with here when the Persian prince with the book of Esther and Mordecai and Haman and all that. That's what's being spoken of here. Now, Xerxes is called Ahasuerus there in the book of Esther. So some pretty interesting stuff here. So this 4th king, the 4th Persian king was Xerxes, the Ahasuerus of the book of Esther. Now history records that Xerxes accumulated great riches. He spent 4 years gathering an army. Listen to this, it's pretty remarkable. 2.5 million men. That's a pretty decent fighting force, right? Now in 480 BC, Xerxes attempted an invasion of Greece to avenge the defeat of his father Darius the Great on a similar expedition 10 years earlier. Well, Xerxes was delayed by the Trojans at Thermopylae. The Persians were finally defeated at the battles of Salamis and Plataea. So now we have this transition from Persia to the Greeks, and this is the time frame that we see happening here, and what it's talking about here. So then in verse 3, we've already identified this: a mighty king shall arise. He shall rule with great dominion. He shall do according to his will. This was Alexander the Great. So his kingdom shall be broken and divided into 4 pieces. Remember we talked about the little horn? So what's that take us back to chapter 8, chapter 7, with the little horn's going to be broken, and then 4 more are going to grow in its place. So his kingdom shall be broken, divided into 4 pieces. This kingdom will not be given to his posterity. So when you hear those words, what's that mean? Your posterity, your descendants, right? So you're Alexander the Great, so that means you're going to get the kingdom, right? Eventually, that he didn't have any descendants at that time. Now, what's interesting, Alexander had no heirs, but a son was posthumously born to his wife Roxana, and so Cassander, who was one of these 4 generals, murdered Roxana and her son to make sure that so Alexander dies while his wife's pregnant. And then the baby's born, and Cassander's like, well, we can't have that. We're not going to wait around for this baby to take Alexander's spot. I'm going to kill both wife and baby. That's pretty brutal. So Cassander, so we have the north, the east, the south, the west, as it lays out, the 4 points: Lysicamus, Seleucus, Ptolemies, and Cassander. So we're gonna involve ourselves with 2 of these primarily in this prophecy. We're looking at the north and the south. Okay, so that's what we have here. So the kingdom's not going to be given, nor will the dominion be great. Now, as confirmed by history, Alexander's empire was eventually divided between his 4 generals after he died in 323. Seleucus, Cassander, Lysicamus, and Ptolemy. So we already know that we're dealing with Egypt, so the Ptolemies are gonna be one of the groups that we're dealing with. The other that we're dealing with is gonna be the Seleucus the First, the Seleucid Syrian Empire. Now, that's again, when you look at the north and the south and how this is referred to, it's in relationship to Israel. So Seleucus in the north of Israel and south of Israel are going to be Egypt and the Ptolemies. There's our two main players. So we're not going to hear a whole lot about Lysicamus and Cassander here as we move forward. So, and that's where we get into this, where we're going to be getting over here into this Egyptian-Syrian conflict is really the content of this book or this chapter. Now, at this point, the glorious man begins to describe an extended conflict between the kings of the north, kings of the south, which will have big impact upon the people of Daniel and Israel. So Daniel's not going to be around for the fulfillment of all this, but it's going to have great effect upon his those who would follow after him for his people. So the conflict will begin. The king of the south will gain in strength. We see this in verse 5. This king is Ptolemy the First. All right, here we go. All right, so let's kick over here. Now, don't let this throw you off. Over here on the first page of the second group of notes, notice it has Cassander to the west, Lysicamus to the north, Seleucus to the north, and Ptolemy's Egypt to the south. Notice there's two norths. Okay, so the way that this would lay out in general terms, like if you were to look at it all, it's Lysicamus, Seleucus, Lysicamus in the north, Seleucus in the east, Ptolemy's in the south, and Cassander in the west. But when we kick over to where Israel is on the map, it becomes the Seleucus now becomes the north. Even though it's east of all four, it's north to Israel. Are you with me? Okay. Let's illustrate this a little bit. Yeah. Shocking. All right, so when this all shakes out, these four kings, when these are laid out, the north, south, east, and west. So this would be Cassander. He was responsible for what? What did we just say he did? That was kind of brutal.
Killed them.
Yeah, baby and mom of Alexander. The north in this setup is going to be Lysicamus. These names are hard to spell. Like they just be like this Jones and the Smiths. And then the Seleucids. Okay, so in this setup, this is northeast southwest, right? But we're not concerned with in relationship to Greece and how the empire is being broke up. We're concerned with where Israel is. Israel in relationship to these two is like there. So in this conflict now, this is the group to the north and this is the group to the south of us, and this is what we're stuck in the middle. We're actually the battleground between these two. I wish I could pull up if there was one of these maps. This is the battleground. This is the land that they're trying to occupy and use for themselves. So the Ptolemies would use this for their benefit to work against these guys and vice versa. So this is the ground that they were using geographically. That's the way it plays out. So in the grand scheme over here to the east, but specifically in relationship to Israel, they're the north. Does that make sense? Okay. So the south Ptolemies, north Seleucids. Okay, so our main timeline then, as you start looking through here, we have Ptolemy the First in the south and Seleucus the First in the north become stronger. And then we see as we move forward, so I was trying to give you this to kind of help give you a little bit of a timeline here. So the king of the south will gain strength, Ptolemy the First, who ruled Egypt 306 to 284. So Daniel around for any of this? He's long gone.
Yeah.
He's
You're welcome.
long gone. Cause we're way back, a couple hundred, this is fulfillment pretty far future. So, now, as well as one of his princes who will gain power over the other, this is thought to refer to one of Alexander's princes or generals, in which case it is Seleucus the First who ruled Syria. So now we have the beginning of this showdown that's going to take place. Caught in the middle between Syria and Egypt, Israel will bear the brunt of much conflict between these two empires. So it's not going to go good for them. So the Ptolemaic and the Seleucid kingdoms received special attention in the prophecy because of their proximity to the people of God. Now, Palestine was a prize coveted by the successive rulers in both of these kingdoms. Very strategic kind of a setup. The Ptolemies wanted to control Palestine as a buffer against invasion by the rival Seleucid kings. The Seleucids wanted control of Palestine as a staging area for invasions into Egypt. So the people of God were brutalized by both regimes. In stage one of this saga, there were three pairs of rival kings. So stage one, we got three pairs of kings that are going to be facing off one against each other. Throughout this chapter, the king of the south refers to the current ruler of Egypt. So every time we read the king of the south, it's not the same guy. It's kicking over to the next one, right? And we go through this whole list of stuff, right? And then the Greek version. So the Greek version of this book, what's that called? Where we have the Old Testament translated into Greek. What's that called? Anybody know the sometimes you'll see it referred to as the LXX. It's called the Septuagint. So Septuagint 70, LXX in Roman numerals is 70. Sometimes you'll see that. So in the Greek version, in the Septuagint, where we had the book of Daniel, when it's translated into Greek, this Hebrew translated into Greek, it always says Egypt instead of the south. Now, in Daniel's time, the kingdom of Syria had not yet been formed. To avoid confusion, he refers to it as the north as opposed to Egypt in the south. So Egypt's been around for a long time.
Yeah,
right?
right.
We go way back to,
Abraham.
oh yeah, way back, right? It's been around, but Syria is not on the scene yet. So, and what we're seeing here, so it's not going to refer to it, it's going to refer to it north. That's why we see the name Egypt popped up here. Not Syria is not on the scene yet. There what used to be Assyria, but not Syria, right? Okay, so caught in the middle, they're going to be having some issues. All right, so there's a failed alliance, verse 6. So the daughter of the south will go to the king of the north. So this actually happened, right? All this stuff is, when you start studying history, all this stuff, the event occurred in the reigns of Ptolemy Philadelphus. So this is 284 to 246, and Antiochus Thais. So there was Bernice was the daughter of the Ptolemy Philadelphus, right? Was given to Antiochus upon the condition that Antiochus divorce his wife Laodice, hoping to make peace between Egypt and Syria. So, all right, I'm going to send you my daughter. You divorce your wife and marry her, and we'll establish peace between us. Seems like a great plan. Now, I can't for the life of me think what would motivate this. Why and how's his current wife going to feel about this? Like, look, we want peace between us and them, so he's sending me up Bernice.
A little bow in her hair.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I'm gonna divorce you and marry her so we can establish a treaty. I'm pretty sure she's not gonna be real happy with that. So what happens? Well, the daughter of the South will not retain her authority. So Bernice gets up there, it doesn't work. 2 years after the marriage, Bernice's father, Ptolemy Philadelphus, died. So back home, he dies. So now the guy that sent her up there and who made this agreement dies. So what do you think is going to happen to the agreement?
Oh,
Yeah. So Antiochus put her away and restored his first wife, Laodice. All right. So you can imagine what happens now. So now, obviously she wasn't real happy because she killed Antiochus. Laodicea killed Antiochus. Bernice gets out of time, but was later put to death along with her children and attendants. This is like some sort of soap opera. This is kind of crazy. This is the stuff that's actual recorded history, and it lines up with exactly what we find here. So Bernice is divorced and then killed, right? So how do you think the South, the Ptolemies felt about it? The next guy in charge, not happy. So a branch of her roots will come with an army. This was Bernice's brother. So brother now is going to avenge sister. This has fallen apart. Sister's been murdered. So his name's Ptolemy. It can't be Frank. It's Euergetes. Now, who failing to save his sister and attack Syria to avenge her death. So he attacks. Well, this avenger, Ptolemy Euergetes, he goes in there with a vengeance and takes some names. He succeeds. He took their gods, their princes, precious articles to Egypt. Euergetes ruled longer than the next Seleucid king, Seleucid Calacinus. Calacinicus. Oh, geez. Right? All right, so now we're moving forward into time. So now we've gone through a number of Seleucids, a number of Ptolemies, and we're about 100 years into this. So now the conflict's going to accelerate. So the king of the north is this Calacinicus, and will try to invade the kingdom of the south. So this was just ongoing, decade after decade. They're at each other, and who's stuck in the middle? Israel. They don't want nothing to do with any of it, but they're part of the battle crown. Now, he doesn't succeed, though his sons Seleucid Cyrannus and Antiochus the Great shall stir up strife. Now, one son in particular, Antiochus the Great, does succeed in overwhelming Egypt, actually regaining Syrian land taken by Egypt. So now we see that the north is prevailing a little bit, but the king of the south is not going to have it, responds in rage. The king in Egypt is Ptolemy Philopator. Now, angry that Antiochus the Great regained control of Syrian territory, he gathered a great army and defeated Antiochus at Raphia. His victory was short-lived, for Antiochus returned with a better equipped army in 203. So it's just never-ending stuff that we see here. So in verses 11 to 13, so and the king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north, and the latter will raise a great multitude, but that multitude will be given into the hand of the former. When the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cause tens of thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail. For the king of the north will again raise a greater multitude than the former. So it just goes on and on and on and on. So this is, again, it's remarkable in its accuracy of what it's telling, but it's just a lot. Now others will contribute to the war against the south. Verse 14. Now those times many will rise up against the king of the south. The violent ones among your people will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they will fall down. So what's this mean? Well, this included Philip, king of Macedon, who aligned with Antiochus. So if we remember how that some others that are other lands there that are lining up, and some Jews are going to rise up. They've had enough, and they try to rise up too, prompted by what they perceived as the fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fall. So there's some insurrection, there's some rising up against these from the Jews in Jerusalem, and this is eventually what we're going to see happening with what's called the Maccabean Revolution. Right? So in these books that we find in the Roman Catholic Bible, that these additional books, the apocryphal books, will have First and Second Maccabees that talk about the Maccabean Revolution that have to do with this time frame that eventually culminates with Antiochus Epiphanes. This is where we're all headed here. So verses 15 to 19, Here's what we see. The king of the north shall prevail against the south, but then fall. Again, this is Antiochus the Great. The forces of the south were not able to resist him. He stood in the glorious land with destruction in his power. So let's see if we can understand a little bit more about that. Now, so this was the Seleucid victories over the Ptolemies. So finally, 203, Antiochus, this is the Great, saw his opportunity to strike at Egypt again. Now Ptolemy the fourth, again, this is on this list of stuff that I've given you here as we're going through here. So Ptolemy the fourth, this is the time frame here, that's what's happening. Had just died and had been succeeded by, of course, Ptolemy the fifth. This is was mere who was a mere boy of 4. So a 4-year-old. The king of the north is Antiochus the Great. So in 202, Antiochus advanced once more against Phoenicia and Palestine with his battle-seasoned veterans. He pushed all the way down to the fortress of Gaza, which fell in 201. He then set siege to the Ptolemies fortress at Panion near the source of the Jordan River. Now Scopas, chief lieutenant of Ptolemy, was defeated by Antiochus the Great at Panion. Chosen people are those elite troops. Scopas made his last stand at Sidon, where Scopas finally surrendered to Antiochus III. A lot of names, a lot of people, a lot of battles. The Holy Land was permanently acquired by the Antioch government. So the Antiochus, so now they've gained power there, and this is right around the late 190s. And so the time frame that we're working towards here is 165. That's the date where everything is gonna that's where it really hits the fan at that point. Now, again, this is Antiochus the Great. Forces of the south were not able to resist him. He stood in the glorious land. Now, he tried to strengthen his kingdom by giving his daughter in marriage. His daughter Cleopatra. Now, I wonder, is this the same Cleopatra? Probably not. I'd be interesting to look up. Given to Ptolemy Epiphanes, but she came to favor the purpose of her husband rather than her father. So Antiochus then turned his attention to the coastlands, making war with the Romans, but was defeated by Scipio Asiaticus, a Roman military leader. So now Rome's starting to come on the scene. So now remember, how's this all work? Started with Babylon, then the Medo-Persians, then the Greeks, and then Rome. So Rome's starting to come on the scene here little by little. And we're going to see them rising up as well. So defeated by the Romans, Antiochus the Great returned home and died soon after. Now at this point, finally, all this stuff, which is a lot, our attention is focused on one leader of the Seleucid or the Syrian Empire who would have a powerful impact upon the people of Daniel, Antiochus Epiphanes. So this is the 175 to 164 time frame that we're looking at here. So in verse 20, it says, then in his place one will arise who will send an oppressor through the jewel of his kingdom, yet within a few days he will be shattered through neither in anger nor in battle. And in his place a despicable person will arise. So here's the transition. Notice the emphasis on this guy is really intense. A despicable person will arise on whom the honor of kingship has not been conferred, but he will come in a time of tranquility and seize the kingdom by intrigue. And the overflowing forces will be flooded away before him and shattered, and also the prince of the covenant. And after an alliance is made with him, he will practice deception, and he will go up and gain power with a small force of people. In a time of tranquility, he will enter the richest parts of the realm, and he will accomplish what his fathers never did, nor his ancestors. He will distribute plunder, booty, and possessions among them, and he will devise his schemes against strongholds, but only for a time. Now, all right, so this is the rise of Antiochus Epiphanes. So in verse 20, he's preceded by a tax collector. Now we know how people love taxes. So how do you think this tax collector guy did? Well,
Couldn't be good.
one who will impose taxes upon the glorious kingdom, again Israel. This is Seleucus Philopator, oldest son of Antiochus and his immediate successor, whose reign will be short-lived compared to his father, who reigned 37 years, who died not in battle, but was poisoned. So after these guys, so that was Antiochus the Great, right? But now will come a vile man with no honor. Held in contempt, the people will not give him honor, right? His official name will be Antiochus Epiphanes, where he's given himself that name, the illustrious. But the people referred to him as Antiochus Epimanes, the insane. So they kind of did a play on this Epiphanes, Epimenes. All right, he's insane. He's not illustrious. He's out of his mind. Well, he shall take the kingdom peaceably, but with intrigue. Now, this may refer to his dealings with the Egyptians or perhaps Israel. After making a league with them, he will act deceitfully and become strong with a small number of people. So he was a conniver, a manipulator, used political intrigue rather than power but than military power to gain his position, which is different than a lot of what we've seen so far, right? It seems like big military, go in, wipe out. This is different. There's something else, there's something interesting about what he's done here. So through peaceful means, he will plunder the rich places of the province. That seems tricky to do, but he did. Now he will provoke the kings of the south. Now, 2 times Antiochus invaded Egypt. So the Egyptian king, Ptolemy Physcon, sought to oppose him, but was betrayed by his own people. Both kings were deceitful liars, but their plotting was subject to the times and manner appointed by God. Now, again, we have to ask ourselves when Antiochus Epiphanes is going to be doing in Jerusalem, what's going on here? Why would God permit such a thing? We talked about this a little bit. Why would God permit such a thing to happen to his people in Jerusalem after they've reestablished the temple? They got things going back. It seemed like things were going well, but what has been the pattern of these folks throughout the whole?
Punishment.
Yeah, so they have involved themselves in some sort of idolatry or some sort of not honoring and worshiping the Lord as they should, and now they're being punished. And it's basically what we see through this pattern throughout the entire Old Testament of things going good and then apostasy and then warning through the prophets. Prophets would warn, and usually they would not listen, and then they would be judged. And as they were judged, they came on really hard times, and that would wake them up to what? To repent and return back to God and reestablish things, and things would get going back good again. And then it just followed, it's this cycle that followed itself time and time again. So we see this happening now here, and they're being judged for that. So God is raising them up. Now, He's not causing it. When we say causing, we're saying that God would not be the author of evil. We always want to make sure we're saying that, but He can co-opt evil decisions into His plan to bring about the ultimate good. So we want to be careful how we talk about that we're saying that God, yes, remember with the prophet Habakkuk, I don't know if you guys remember that, but Habakkuk, in fact, we've just been studying this book of Hebrews. At the end of chapter 10, the writer of Hebrews quotes Habakkuk and some of the things that were happening there. And so basically, this is taking us way back to the beginning of this book of Daniel and what happened. Habakkuk was upset with the condition of things in the land. And he's like, God, what are you doing? Doesn't appear that you're doing anything. How about you do something? And God says, back in this dialogue, He says, I am doing something, and what I'm doing, if I told you, you wouldn't believe it. He says, behold, I'm raising up the Chaldeans, Babylon. And then once Habakkuk hears about the Chaldeans and Babylon, he's like, that's not what I had in mind. I didn't really think that's what we need per se, because those people are wicked. And how can those wicked people judge us? But God did raise them up, and he allowed them, permitted them to, through their own free will decisions, to come and carry out judgment against unrepentant. So at this time, that's gonna be Judah. Yeah, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. So we have Judah and the northern tribes of Israel, and then Judah in the south. He's gonna carry out judgment, and they're gonna be carried into captivity. And so that's the same kind of dynamic we have here in 165. In that time frame there's gonna be judgment carried out. And that's what's happening. So he's gonna, that's what we see happening here with Antiochus. So both kings were deceitful liars, but their plotting was subject to the times and manner appointed by God. On his return home, so he's going up north, no, going down south, because he's in the north. He's going down south to Egypt, but on his return home, he passed through Israel and was moved against the Holy Covenant, the institutions of the law of Moses. So, for whatever reason, he's got disdain for what they're doing there and is going to go in there and defile it and shut it all down. So he's going to bring blasphemies against Israel. Now, once again, and this is later on in verses 29 and 30, at the appointed time he will return and come into the south, but this last time it will not turn out to the way it did before. For the ships of Kittim will come against him, therefore he will be disheartened and will return and become enraged at the holy covenant and take action. So he will come back and show regard to, for those who forsake the holy covenant. All right, so basically it's like this. He's trying to do some certain things that didn't work out. He's angry, and on his way home, he's going to take out his anger and his frustration on Israel and in Jerusalem. He's going to just get out his frustrations there. So, once again, Antiochus Epiphanes will head toward the south. This was his third invasion, but he was not successful as before, for Roman ships from Cyprus, Kittim, threatened reprisal. So Rome is a thorn in his side here. We're going to see that that's obvious because Rome is rising to power. Because when Jesus comes on the scene, who's the power at that time?
Rome.
It's Rome, right? So there's this transition. Now, frustrated, he will take out his rage against the Holy Covenant by showing regard for those who forsake the Holy Covenant, by defiling, and all the way down to verse 32, the sanctuary fortress, the temple, by taking away the daily sacrifices, by placing there the abomination of desolation, and by flattering those who do wickedly against the covenant. So listen to this. Verse 32, and by smooth words he will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant. But the people who know their God will display strength and take action. This is the uprising. This is the Maccabean revolution. And those who have insight among them will give understanding to the many, yet they will fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity and by plunder for many days. Now when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join them in hypocrisy. And so, verse 35 and 36, this is some of the key verses about this whole thing. And some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end of the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time. Verse 36, then the king will do as he pleases. So this is Antiochus. And he will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. And he will prosper until the indignation is finished, for that which is decreed will be done. And he will show no regard for the gods of his fathers, or for the desire of women, nor will he show regard for any other god, for he will magnify himself above all. But instead he will honor a god of fortresses, a god whom his fathers did not know. He will honor him with gold, silver, costly stones, and treasure. Now, do you remember who who he sets up an idol to in there? You guys remember what god?
So.
It's a Greek god,
Zeus.
Zeus. Remember, he's gonna set up in the temple, he's gonna set up an idol to Zeus. And he's also gonna do what else in the temple on the altar?
Swine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's gonna sacrifice and they're gonna eat. Gonna have a hog roast.
Barbecue.
Mm-hmm. So, this is what's happening here with Antiochus. Now, in the years 169 to 167, here's what happened. And this is recorded from extra biblical sources, right? Because we don't have this in biblical account. We have it predicted here in Daniel, but the actual history is recorded by multiple historians. Now, so here's what happened. In 167 to 169 to 167, he took the city of Jerusalem and plundered the temple. He commanded the Jews to worship the Greek idol which he set up in the temple, believed to be Zeus. He put an end to daily sacrifices and polluted the altar by offering swine flesh on it. He also forbid circumcision, the observance of the Sabbath, and possession of a copy of the law. So you could not have God's word if you had possession of any of the books of the Old Testament. He forbade that, and anything that had to do with the most important things of Judaism, he shut it all down. So you can imagine when they talk about the abomination of desolation and those kind of words and the stuff that he was doing there, this is as bad as it gets. So in verse 32 and 33, those who know God will resist valiantly. They shall be strong, carrying out great exploits and instructing many. Now, when they fall, they shall receive aid. For many days they shall, by sword, flame, captivity, and plunder, they will receive a little help, even from many, though intrigue, through intrigue. When those of understanding fall, it will be to refine them and to purge them and to make them white until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. So the events described here were fulfilled during the Maccabean period, which began in 168 with the revolt of Mattathias, an early priest, and his 5 sons. So up to this point, there's little controversy over the content of the vision. It describes the conflict between the Persians and the Greeks, followed by the conflict between the Syrians and the Egyptians. The latter described in detail because Israel, again, was caught in the middle. Israel in particular would suffer the blasphemies of one Syrian king. This is all pointing greatly to Antiochus Epiphanes. So from Daniel 11:36 on, there's quite a diversity of opinions. So once we hit verse 36, then some people change how they're going to approach this. So when they talk about what's happening here, so let's ask this question based on what we've studied from these other chapters. Why would somebody force these things or look at them in a different perspective to say that something other than what's happening with Antiochus and the immediate history there? Why would they try to do something different with it? What's behind it? You have any thoughts? Remember how some people approach this book?
Oh, man.
Oh, they're
Written
listening.
after it happened. Written after it's happened.
Okay.
A lot of people say.
Okay, some do say that, yeah, so they're, okay, from a different perspective though.
Are you saying this is end times?
Yeah, so they're forcing this now onto stuff that's gonna happen. Remember how we were looking at the 70 weeks? They would say that last week is representative of a time which is far into the future, and that's gonna coincide with this whole last 7 years, the tribulation, the rapture. It's the part of the dispensational premillennial view that's gonna force this stuff into the future. And if they force this stuff into the future, when they talk about someone who is like the worst of the worst and doing things that's awful in the temple and all that kind of stuff, they identify that as someone entirely different. And they usually force that stuff onto someone called the Antichrist. Remember, we talked about that, the Antichrist is not a singular individual. That's not a good doctrine, when we talk about that stuff. So they try to force this stuff, far into the future. So there's verse 36, some suggest that a Roman emperor is being described, still others believes it refers to someone yet to come. So some would throw it into that time frame. So, okay, so with verse 36 until the close of this book is actually going to be the content of our next lesson. So this stuff, there's not a whole lot in here that's really, like with chapter 10, when we started looking at some of this, there were some really cool prophecies and trying to see how these things were fulfilled. But we also were able to take some time and look at the spiritual warfare and the reality of things and look behind the scenes and have some discussions there about this kind of stuff. Once we get to chapter 11, it's pretty mechanical and dry. If you go back to chapter 9, remember in chapter 9, we had this prayer, right? This beautiful prayer by Daniel. And then we could talk about, some aspects of nature of prayer and Daniel the man and how and his daily life and prayer and all the things we talked about here. And the things that were part of his prayer in chapter 9, we were able to talk about that. And then we were able to talk about this vision of the 70 weeks. And then this other vision that we see here in chapter 10, there's a lot more. Chapter 11 is very mechanical and kind of dry, and there's not a lot of theological stuff here. It's this, the Seleucids, the North did this, the Ptolemies did this, and it's this back and forth. Now, what's remarkable about it is it is a beautiful, it's a beautiful fulfillment of those things, but there's not really a whole lot of other things that we can really pull out of this. The word that keeps coming back to my mind, and I don't want to say this about God's word ever, is this kind of dry. It's very then this, then this, then this, and it talks about certain things. We talked a little bit about what brought on this for Israel and that it was judgment, but there's just not a whole lot of other stuff here. There's not really any reference to Daniel per se in this. It's very mechanical and very lays out historical. It's fascinating how it lays out, but there's not really a whole lot else for us to do.
Just the facts, Jack.
That's what this is. Yeah, yeah. What was that old show, Dragnet? Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. So now, we could sit here and just struggle through like all this, but you have the information that you can look at if you want to go study it further. If you want to see how some of the history plays out here with the political intrigue, there is some really interesting history that surrounds the whole situation with Bernice. And that's kind of pretty fascinating what happened with that. There's a little bit more, but this just kind of lays out, but it is beautiful how it all plays out and lines up with these actual events, but that's really the sum of it. And what we see here. And I'd love to be able to tell you that we have a whole lot more that we could do here, but we just don't.
Did Israel ever, the king that was king when they got taken to Babylon, was that the last king of Israel?
Yes, because when they returned, they did not establish the kings.
Yeah.
So,
They never had a king again till Christ came.
correct. Yeah, because as far as now they were under Roman rule and the Herods and that kind of thing, but they did not have a king that was necessarily like in the line of David, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't think there's any record. I'm trying to remember if there's something during this intertestamental period of time where they attempted to reestablish that, but it went wrong. Let's ask our good friend.
Now just
Let's see.
Told you my brain don't work right.
No, I think that's an excellent question.
Always goes off in the wrong direction.
No, that's a good question. Let's see what this says. Okay, following the 70-year captivity at the hands of Babylon. And they returned to reestablish the temple and such. Was there ever another king of Israel, Judah, any of that? Were there any other kings? Who was the last king of Israel, Judah? Short answer, no. After the Babylonian exile, Israel and Judah never had another king ruling in the land. So the last king then would have been Zedekiah, who was he was the one responsible for they were paying tribute to Babylon. So Babylon came in around 604, 605, right? And they started doing their thing there, and they were allowing Israel to exist but paying tribute. And eventually they're like, you know what? Zedekiah's like, we're not gonna do that. And that's when Nebuchadnezzar was like, I'm sick of this, came in and wiped them out.
Okay.
So Zedekiah was installed as a puppet king by Nebuchadnezzar, but then he rebelled against Babylon, and then they were destroyed. Zedekiah was captured, his sons were executed, and then he was blinded and taken into exile. So with his removal, the Davidic monarchy in Jerusalem came to an end politically. So after the exile, no more kings. When the Jews returned from exile, and this is under Cyrus the Great in 538, they were allowed to rebuild, but they were still under Persian rule, right? So they had governors like Zerubbabel. Now remember Zerubbabel and Joshua the priest, the high priest. Those are fascinating individuals that we read about um, that are actually typological of Jesus Christ. When you read about Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest, but no king sat on the throne. And then you get into the Hasmonean dynasty, which is in the Maccabean rulers. They functioned like kings, but they did not rule as a true king of Israel. So, but then Herod the Great ruled at the time of Jesus. But he was appointed by Rome. He had nothing to do with the Davidic line. So, yeah, good question. So, yeah, that was what we see there happen, and there was never a reestablishment. But I like how you said until Jesus came, because there's a name for him, something like the King of Kings. Yeah, so I like that. Good question. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, well, I wish I had more for you, but this is all we got for here. It's very mechanical in how this plays out, but then once we pick up with verse 36, we'll finish through the end of chapter 12 next week, and we'll be able to complete the vision of the time of the end. So if you guys don't have any questions, we're gonna call it a day early. I know you're really upset with me. You're really mad, but this is the way, this book really lined out well for the semester. So, having our midterm and our final, and also, so next week's our last class. Most likely. I've got some things that I'm most likely, I'm having to take a trip to Virginia. Kind of a last second, not necessarily an emergency situation, but my dad is in the hospital, and he's now being transitioned to like a transitional care unit for rehab. And then he had a knee replacement years ago that got infected. So I was like, thanks. It's like, I just got my dad and now you're having this. So they had to deal with the infection, and now they're trying to get him back up and running. But it's a weird situation. So anyway, me and my brother are needing to go out there. So we're most likely gonna go out there, leave Sunday night, drive through the night, and be there Monday, Tuesday, and come home Wednesday. Now, here's the tricky part. There was a chance I was gonna jump on Zoom for next week anyway, because next Thursday, I'm gonna be at Cincinnati for an event called the Greater Cincinnati Area Rally, which is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday thing. And I was considering teaching the class and then leaving right after class to go to Cincinnati to be there for the evening. Most likely what I'm gonna do is go to Cincinnati and teach from there on Zoom. So, that's what we're gonna do next week, is to be on Zoom next week, and then that'll be our last class time. And then the following week will be the final, which we'll do just like we did the midterm, which, you guys don't need to worry about that, but you and Jose will, so. So that's that, okay, does that make sense?
We should worry, they should not worry.
What's that?
We're audited.
Oh.
Yeah. Yep, yep, yeah, they don't have to do all the work. Yeah, so, all of your chapter reviews and stuff will need to be turned in by then too, so. Okay, I
Just send
guess,
me your email, I don't know if you check it out, I got 2 left, as I told you, 11 and 12.
okay,
And the questions, I don't know if I opened the wrong one on,
something's goofed up, on what chapter?
chapter 11.
Chapter 11, something's wrong with it, alright, I'll take a look at
The
that.
questions that were asked, like a repeated questions.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, well, I will take a look at that and I'll send you an email,
Okay.
so. Okay, well, let's call it a day, thank you guys. Yeah, don't tell anybody. That we got done so early. Sneak out.
We'll go out that door.
Yeah.
Go out the back door.